Latin word for land of the blacks, basically, right? And it was given by Flora Shaw, the wife of the guy who created Nigeria, right? She was a journalist. This British guy, something Shaw, last or actually was it? My bad. Flora Shaw was Lugard's wife. I got threw off because the last name is different. But yeah, Lugard, the infamous guy, is the guy who created Nigeria, that British dude, and his wife Flora Shaw, as it says right here, is credited with having coined the name Nigeria, right? So the British created it. They ran it up until the fake independence. And it was a fake independence because all they did when they quote unquote gave us independence was they put in black lackeys to run the positions that white people were running before, right? So before, the governor general of Nigeria was a white guy. After independence, they put a Nigerian in there, and then they changed the name of the office from governor general to president. Okay, and they did that with all the other positions as well. And it's the same thing. And kind of after that, you know, when Britain's power waned, the U.S. Their cousins came in and just started administering it for them. So it was the same deal. And now US still largely runs it, but then also China's kind of creeping in there, getting a bit of leverage. But the point is, these are all outsiders, not even African, let alone Nigerian, people who for thousands of years have been killing black people all over the globe. Because if you don't know, we lived all over the globe. It wasn't just Africa before, but we've gotten chased, cornered into one tiny part of the globe relatively, right? So they control this thing and they tell the president what to do. And if the president doesn't do what they want him to do, they either throw him out using a military coup or they delete him. Okay? And they do this all over Africa and really all over the developing world as well. You can see that with cases like Idi Amin, who, after he started resisting, he was thrown out in a coup. Thomas Sankara, he was killed in a coup. Patrice Lumumba, he was killed in a coup. And then even you have cases like Robert Mugabe, who after he started resisting, they didn't throw him out with a coup and they didn't kill him, but they just destroyed his country's economy, right? Because they had economic controls over these countries. So basically they did some stuff to make sure that its currency would crash and stuff was in the dish. So he got blamed for it, right? So basically they will destroy you if you don't do their bidding because you are their employee. It's just like at a job. If you don't do what your boss wants, he's going to make your life hell or he'll fire you. It's the same thing. Only difference here is that in addition to being able to fire you, they can delete you. All right. So why do I say all this? I'm saying all this because we got to get in our head that the only way you could be president of Nigeria and stay there is if you do what these people tell you to do. And okay, I know a lot of you aren't convinced, and I'm gonna do future videos and lectures presenting all the evidence for neocolonialism, right? But I'm not doing all that now. But for those of you who aren't convinced, at the very least, my fellow Igbos, I'm gonna talk to you specifically. At the very least, you have to admit clearly Nigeria is not for Igbos. Clearly it's not. Even Yorubas, clearly Nigeria is not for y'all. It clearly, of all the people who live in Nigeria, the people at the top of the hierarchy are the Fulani, and of course the Fulani are just lackeys of the outsiders, right? But again, even if you don't believe that, clearly they're above everyone else in the hierarchy, right? So if you don't do what they say, you're out, right? You're out. So then, given that knowledge, right, how could we honestly believe that Peter Obi is going to come into the Nigerian presidential office and empower Igbos or empower any of the other groups in Nigeria that are disenfranchised when we know that's the reality? It's not possible. If he tried to do that, one of the things I said would happen before would happen. Either he gets thrown out of there or he gets thrown off of planet Earth. It is what it is. Those are the only two options, right? So for Peter Obi to even be running for Nigerian president, that either means that A, he's a fool. With all due respect to him, I say none of this with, intent to disrespect. I have nothing personal against Peter Obi. I've never met him. I have no connection to him. So again, nothing personal against him. But really, if he's even running for president of Nigeria, especially as an Igbo man, either A, he's a fool because he believes that he can actually get in there and do something positive, or B, he's a traitor because he knows what it is and he's saying, let me go in there and get my money. He's saying, let me go in there and I don't care what happens. I don't care who I have to delete. I don't care whose village I have to impoverish more. I don't care which down man I have to keep down. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to get my money. I'm going to get my prestige. Right? So when you understand all that, there's no reason that we should be cheering on Peter Obi so heavy. Okay? So that's the first part. Let me take a pause, see if anyone has any questions. If not, I'll continue. You got any questions here? Nope. Okay. All right, then I'll continue on, right? So that's the first reason why Nigeria can never be made to work for Nigerians and Igbos especially. The second reason is that, in addition to the fact that outsiders currently operate Nigeria, and even if you refuse to believe that, at the very least, it's clear non-Igbos who hate Igbos continue to operate Nigeria. The second reason is that when you look at things on a spiritual level, right, it's virtually impossible for something to go against what it was created to do. Okay? Because countries, when you look at it, are spiritual entities, right? Because you can't touch a country, right? Sure, you could touch the land in a country, you could touch the people in a country, you could touch the water in a country, but you can't touch the country itself, right? You can't touch the US, you can't touch Nigeria, you can't touch any of these countries, right? So what does that mean? That means that a country is a spiritual entity, right? Because our world is really two worlds. It's the physical world and the spiritual world, right? The physical world is the stuff that you can see and touch. The spiritual world is the stuff that you can't really touch. Okay? So then as a spiritual entity, right, the country does kind of have, in a way, a mind of its own. All right? It has an energy it gives off. It has things that it pushes people to do. And since Nigeria was created to oppress Nigerians, since Nigeria was created to rob Nigerians, was created to kill Nigerians or delete Nigerians rather, because it was created to do that, that's basically all it's ever going to do. It's very difficult, very, very, very difficult, maybe impossible for you to get Nigeria to do anything else. So when you have that understanding of that spiritual knowledge, the idea that a president of Nigeria could get Nigeria to work for Nigerians, it's absurd. That's like saying that you could get a shark to work for fish. You know, that's like saying you could get an eagle to work for mice. You know, that's like saying that you could get a spider to work for flies. It's not going to happen because they were created to do the exact opposite. All right, so that just is what it is. So that's the first reason, really, we shouldn't be into this Peter Obi hype. Okay, really, people should just see this thing and ignore it, but they're not, right? Now, I think the second reason, though, the second big reason we shouldn't be into this Peter Obi hype is because Peter Obi himself is not exceptional. What do I mean by that? And again, I want to reiterate again that this is not personal at all. I don't know Peter Obi. You know, I have no evidence that, you know, he's not nice to the people he personally knows or whatever, right? But when you look at his track record, what is Peter Obi? At the end of the day, he's just another common Nigerian politician, really, right? Because if you look at his record, he was governor of Anambra State previously, and the governors of Nigeria are really just little versions of the president, right? The president's job is to make sure that Nigerians in general suffer, right? And then the governor's job, each governor's job is to make sure that the people in their state suffer. That is their job. You got to make sure that the resources are taken out of that state. You got to make sure that people in that state are suffering. They're leaving this planet early. They're sad. They're poor. They don't rise up to better themselves. That is your job as governor. Okay. And, you know, going against that, right? Getting, you know, the state, the individual state within Nigeria to work for the people of that state is just as crazy as trying to get Nigeria in general to work for Nigerians, as I explained before, right? But then even if you just want to ignore that and say, okay, well, whatever, maybe he can do the impossible. But did he? When he was governor of Anambra State, did Peter Obi do the impossible? No, he didn't. Look, maybe, you know, maybe things got a little less bad here or there, maybe, although I haven't heard that. Personally, I've not heard that. Only thing I've heard about his time in Anambra State is actually that, you know, he canceled some elections, right? Which is the same rigging thing that we're used to. And by the way, also the other thing I forgot to mention when talking about Nigeria in general is the very obvious point that these elections are rigged. Okay, so all these people campaigning for Peter Obi, again, the most respect to you guys, absolutely not personal, no disrespect, but your efforts don't even have a correlation to the result of the election because we know these things are rigged. We've seen it a billion times before. Everyone votes for one person, another person goes in office. We've seen that with the presidency. We've seen that with every other position, right? So again, why even bother if it's not your decision, really, who becomes president of Nigeria, right? But anyway, Peter Obi, the only thing I've heard about his time as Anambra governor is that he perpetuated the same thing. He canceled elections. That's what I heard. But then even beyond that, even if he did some tiny little things that were good here and there, on the whole, did things in Anambra State really drastically change for the better? Like, is Anambra State a paradise now? Is Anambra State heaven? Is Anambra State even a good day on earth? Or is it, you know, a place with countless challenges, a place with a bunch of problems like the rest of Igbo land today? This is the latter now. Okay, so that's his track record. Then even if you look at what he said, because I watched some interviews of Peter Obi. I've been like, all right, let me see what's going on with this guy. Is he exceptionally charismatic? And no, I know that's somewhat subjective, but personally, I don't find him that charismatic. But beyond that, right? Beyond that, when I looked at what he said about what he would do policy wise anyway, mind you, when Nigerian politicians are talking about what they're going to do policy wise, it's all just noise. They don't even decide what they do. Once they get in power, the people who run the country tell them what they're going to do, right? So that's not important. But nonetheless, he doesn't have any sort of exceptional platform. They ask him in interviews, oh, what are you going to do about insecurity? And then he goes, oh, well, I can't tell you, but I'll tell you when I get in office and it'll be something exceptional. What kind of answer is that? That's just slippery politician talk. That's like an eel slipping right through your hands. Doesn't mean anything. They ask him, because he took trips to several foreign countries like Egypt and I believe maybe Singapore. They asked him why he went there. He said something like, oh, to see how they do, in particular with Egypt. He said, oh, to see how they do electricity. I think he said the same thing with Singapore as well. He said, okay, oh, they're doing well in electricity. I went there to see how to do it and then I'll implement in Nigeria. But he never said how. It's the same old political speak of, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring you the moon and the stars and all the fish in the sea. But they don't even tell you how. Right? So given that Peter Obi isn't exceptional, there's no reason for us to believe that he's going to behave exceptionally once he's in office if he gets selected as Nigerian president, and that he's somehow going to overturn the gigantic hurdle of, getting over the fact that Nigeria was made to make Nigerians suffer, right? Getting over that hurdle in order to make it work for the people who live there, Igbos included. There's no reason to believe that, right? So that's the second reason I don't buy into this Peter Obi hype, why this Igbo man is not obedient, okay, in line with the the title of the live stream, and why I don't think other people should be either, right? So let me take another quick pause, see if anyone has comments. What's up, people? Please like as you get onto the stream. Hold up. Please like as you get onto this. Oops. All right. Yeah. All right. Please give me a like as well. Subscribe. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Please let me know. But it doesn't look like anyone has questions, so I'm just gonna go on with what I got to say, right? So then I think the third reason, let's switch it up. Let's get a different picture of Peter Obi. Okay, this one when he was on CNN. That's why not? Why not? Let's keep the one of him at CNN. But yeah, anyway, the third reason that I don't think we should get seduced by these random claims that Peter Obi is gonna somehow transform Nigeria's economy, right? And the third reason that we shouldn't be hyped, specifically Igbos, Ndibo, Biko, I'm talking to you right now. The third reason we shouldn't be seduced by this Peter Obi hype is because if he were to become president, the amount of backlash against Igbos and the amount of confusion among Igbos that would cause would be crazy. It would be immense. It would be off the charts. Why is that? For two reasons. One, the next thing that the people who want Nigeria really want to do, they're already doing it, but they want to do it even more, is suppress the Biafra movement, right? Because we know right now, agitation for Biafra, which is of course an Igbo movement to secede from Nigeria, become independent, is at an all-time high since the end of the war in 1970. Okay, and even though, for the record, while I sympathize with Biafra like any other Igbo, and I also believe that Igbo should be independent, right? We shouldn't be suffering in Nigeria. Nigeria should be dissolved peacefully, of course, preferably, but should be dissolved, right? Igbo should be able to manage ourselves. I don't think Biafra is the ideal way for us to be independent. And I say that with the most respect for Biafra agitators, right? And there are a number of things that I disagree with Biafra agitators on, things that with all the respect, shout out to them, even because they're fighting for us. But there's a lot of things I think should be done differently. But with that being said, the great thing about the Biafra movement is at least they understand the biggest picture, that Igbo's got to be independent. We got to be free. All right, we got to be out of this Nigeria thing. We got to be determining our own affairs, right? So that's the positive in that. But again, because the people who run Nigeria want us to suffer, they want to keep us down. Their whole thing is to just suppress that Biafra movement. They want to crush it and keep people in Nigeria, right? They just on one Nigeria heavy, right? So whoever the next president of Nigeria is going to carry out that agenda. Now, can you imagine how confused people are going to become if an Igbo president is installed at this height of Biafra agitation, and during this time when Nigeria is suppressing Biafra, right? Because two things are going to happen. First, you're going to have some Igbos, a good number of Igbos, who are going to see Peter Obi in office and think, oh, Nigeria is finally working for us. And they'll stop agitating. They'll rest on their laurels. And then several years will pass them by, right? So that's bad. It'll just cool people down. It'll be like a sleeping pill, okay? A patient that, an evil doctor is trying to mess with is woken up from their coma. They're trying to get free, and then the doctor gives them a sleeping pill. They fall back. You know what I mean? That's what it'll be. Just like when, again, with all due respect to, when Barack Obama was elected president of the US, a lot of Black Americans stopped agitating because they wrongly thought, oh, we've arrived now that Obama's president. And they didn't do anything for 8 years. Nothing got better. In fact, it ended up getting a little worse. Same thing will happen with Igbos in Nigeria if Peter Obi were to get elected, right? Second thing that'll happen related to that is that when Peter Obi is carrying out the acts to suppress Biafra, that is going to make a large number of Igbos and other people as well think that the Igbos are the ones oppressing themselves, right? Because at least right now, we're clear on the fact that, what? Our enemies are not Igbo. Now, there's some disagreement as to exactly who they are. Some would say it's just all non-Igbos. Some are saying it's the Fulani. Some are saying, like myself, that, the ultimate bad is just, non-Africans, right? But, even though there's disagreement on the specifics, at least now we agree, you know what? It's non-Igbos doing it. At least most people. You will get a minority saying that, we're doing it to ourselves. But now, if Peter Obi were to get in there, that minority I'm talking about who's saying we're doing it to ourselves is going to shoot up. And at that point, we would have lost sight of our enemy. And it's kind of like if you're in a war, if you don't see where your enemy is, right? You think your enemy's in the bush, but they're really by the river. You got your back to the river, you're pointing your gun at the bush. Your enemy can just snipe you in the back, you're gone, because you don't know who they are. The same thing would happen if Peter Obi is Nigerian president and carrying out orders to oppress the Biafra movement and Igbos in general. And then on top of that, outsiders, other tribes like, Yoruba people, Efik people, shout out to Efik people. I'm also Efik, Efik grandfather. All these other groups are gonna look at Peter Obi carrying out the orders to oppress Igbos. They'll look at the Igbos thinking he's doing it. Even the Peter Obi supporters will be fighting the Igbos who are awake, right? You see the Biafra people and other people who, are not with one Nigeria and wouldn't have been seduced by Peter Obi. They'd all be fighting. And Igbos will look very stupid because it'll look like we're fighting among ourselves, right? And when outsiders look at that, that takes the Igbo image down. And, I know sometimes people want to say that, oh, who cares what other people think? But the image of a people is important. The image of a people is very important, right? Now, we should have a debate about exactly what constitutes a good image or a bad image, right? What criticisms we should care about and what we shouldn't care about. But clearly, you cannot completely discount how other people's view you, because that affects how they treat you. That affects your ability to make political alliances. That affects your ability to make economic alliances. That affects your ability to make business deals and business decisions. That affects your ability to travel freely. It affects how you move in the world if other people look at you as down. So if the Igbo image goes down because Peter Obi's election as president and the events that come after that make it look like we're fighting among ourselves, make it look like we're oppressing ourselves, even though we're really not, that's a massive L for Igbo people. It's a massive, massive L for Igbo people. And then on top of that, what you got to consider is that, again, the Nigerian president isn't just in office to oppress Igbos. They're in office to oppress all Nigerians, right? So Peter Obi is going to be carrying out the oppression of all the other Nigerians as well. He's going to be carrying out the oppression of the Hausa. He's going to be carrying out the oppression of the Yorubas. He's going to be carrying out the oppression of the Ibibios. He's going to be carrying out the oppression of the Efiks. He's going to be carrying out the oppression of, Ijaw and other people who live in the Niger Delta. Everyone. And we know there's already widespread anti-Igbo sentiment, all right? My fellow Igbos, y'all know this is true, all right? We just get hated on by people everywhere, right? And, we could have a discussion about the nuances of that, why that is, but certainly it's there and we don't want it to increase. That's the last thing we want. But if Peter Obi gets in office and he's carrying out the oppression of these other groups, if you think they don't like Igbos now, wait until you see what they think of us when Peter Obi is in office, carrying out oppression of them. Wait until you see what the Niger Delta people will think of us when Peter Obi is in office, carrying out the theft of their oil. If you think Yoruba, shout out to all my Igbos who live in Lagos, but if you think the Yorubas there are giving you trouble now, imagine what they're going to do to you when Peter Obi is in office and he's the one carrying out the nonsense that Nigeria has in store for them. basically finished, done. It'll be terrible. It'll be a disaster, right? So, we can't just get seduced by this idea that, oh, if an Igbo president is um in office in Nigeria, that's gonna at least make things better for Igbos. No. Again, like I always say, this is chess, not checkers. You gotta think about all the implications of each move. And really, because of the stuff I just laid out, that's one reason why I think there is a high possibility, much higher than I thought before, that they will install Peter Obi as president, because they really want to keep Igbos down, the people who run Nigeria, right? Especially because we're agitating more now, with the possible exception of the people in Niger Delta, non-Igbos in Niger Delta, because obviously there are some Igbos there. I know they might not like me saying that, but it is what it is. But anyway, right? With the possible exception of the non-Igbos in Niger Delta and maybe some other groups as well. Because again, I don't want to say maybe there's some groups I'm forgetting or I'm just not aware of that maybe are smaller but are also agitating. But with the possible exception of the people in Niger Delta, Igbos are agitating more than anyone else right now for the end of Nigeria. Everyone is fed up, but Igbos really more fed up and are more serious about leaving, which is why you see the Biafra movement being so big, right? So given that, because of that, the people who run Nigeria really want to keep the Igbos down. They want to suppress us. They especially want to confuse us. They especially want to destroy our image among other Nigerians. So installing Peter Obi will be the